everybody. Welcome to episode 16 of Track Talk. Today we are talking with Marc Lafleur. Marc is from Cornwall, Ontario. Year one, he was doing Calabogie track days. Year two, he won the championship for the CASC regional GT3 class. And now he's going to be fielding a GT4 Mercedes-Benz AMG with VPX Motorsport. Marc is a super knowledgeable guy. He is a serial entrepreneur, written a book called True Founder, and now he is bringing his talents to the motorsport industry. We hope you guys enjoy the interview and welcome Marc. Kind of dive right into what you were up to during your off season.
So mine's probably different than a lot of drivers out there because I just started driving 2 years ago. So I'm still kind of getting used to the whole off season life of what it takes to actually be a driver in a series like FEL. But we were doing a lot of traveling. I wrote a book. So True Founder came out in February this past year. So that was a lot, took up a lot of my off season time. We had tons of traveling going on and speaking engagements. So it was really a lot about trying to balance my, I guess, career and my business world with the fact that now I've taken up driving race cars. And it's hard. You know, I'm lucky I have a sim at home, but just being home for us is kind of rare. So anytime I was home, we try to spend time on the sim, but we were traveling a lot, getting ready for the book launch. And my previous company that I had started, the contract that I had with them ended over the winter too. So it was a lot of like this transition period. So my whole off season was filled with business stuff. So now I have a lot of catch up to do to make sure that I'm ready for the season coming up, because it's literally right around the corner now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into that a little bit more. What is it that you do? And then what's your book about?
Yeah, well, I guess like my claim to fame for most people is I was the former CEO and co-founder of a company called True Local. So we started that in 2016. And, I had no business experience. I had like two failed shitty startups before this. And I just fell in love with entrepreneurship. I was always a really bad student. And I always thought that would kind of translate to being a bad employee. So I didn't realize that business was an option until about second year university. I was at the University of Waterloo, and luckily that's like a very entrepreneurial school. So coming from a small town, not even knowing that business was an option, going to the University of Waterloo just helped me kind of realize that, oh, wait, like I don't have to be an employee. I can start my own thing. So did two of those and struck out, but third time's a charm. And True Local was essentially your very like prototypical e-commerce brand. So we were a direct to consumer food company in 2016. The timing was perfect. We focused exclusively on locally raised meat. So people that wanted to shop with local suppliers could go online and mix and match a box of whatever products they want that was from their province. And over the course of 5 years, we went from, I went from like, literally living on student loan dollars and trying to figure out where rent was going to come from to building it to almost $20 million in 5 years. We had 60 employees. And then we were actually acquired at the end of 2020. So that was, a huge life-changing moment, considering I grew up with $0, holes in my shoes. We didn't even have a car growing up. And I always think that that's kind of where my love of cars came from was, you always want what you can't have. So growing up without a car, I just obsessed over like Top Gear was what got me into it. Like I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I just started falling in love with cars. And then it kind of got to this point where I was probably like 28, 29, and I still didn't have a nice car, but I loved cars so much that it kind of just got to a point where I'm like, well, one day I don't just want to have a nice car. I want to drive the shit out of this nice car. I want to be a good driver. And that's kind of where this whole thing came from. So two things. Number one was I wanted to stay sharp. So we wrote a book. The book is called True Founder. It's what no one has the guts to teach you about starting your first company. And it's the book that I wish that I had whenever I was starting True Local, because it kind of dispels a lot of the myths of being a first-time founder, how you can have work-life balance and, you should be safe and comfortable all the time. Like that's all bullshit if you're starting a company and it's your first company. So I wrote a book about it. But then the next thing was racing. And I was like, hey, this is the first time in my life that I can focus on something that I think I like. And the idea was, if I'm going to do this, I want to treat it like a business. So I'll take the money, I'll buy a car, and I'm going to go to the track every single day, or I'm going to go to the track as much as possible for that whole first year. And the idea is that if I'm progressing faster than other people in their first year, then let's take the next step and go racing. So I've never done karting. I've never been in a race car. I've never been on a track. And this was a year and a half ago. And I bought this. I think it's sick. I bought this awesome BMW M3 2004 out of Montreal, and it was half ready. It was like a track streetcar kind of thing. And I was just outside of Ottawa at the time. Like we live in Kitchener, but we spent that kind of whole summer just outside Ottawa. So I spent all my time at Calabogie, and I didn't know shit. Like I didn't even know, okay, do you call the track and say, hey, I'm coming to race around your track? Do you like, I didn't know there were all these different organizations that rent the track, and that's how you do track days. And then there's all these different race series. I had no idea. So I literally called up Calabogie and I'm like, hey, I'm this new driver and I have this car. Like, can I come in? And they're like, yep, no problem. We have these like lead follow events. So that was a year and a half ago. And that was my first time on track. And then from there, like I immediately fell in love. And I was at the track every single race day at Calabogie, to the point where their GM, who's now gone, his name's Greg, I think he's at Road America now. Awesome guy. Like really was a big reason as to why I got into this more. But he's like, dude, I don't know if you know this. He's like, you were the person who was at the track the most. Like throughout the entire season, you're at the most track days, the most one more laps. Like you were just there all the time. So after that first year, like I had a lot of help from a lot of people. Like obviously Jay Fredericks from Power Sport Garage is over there, and you know he got the car ready for me in that first kind of track day, track season for me. And at the end of it, we were feeling pretty good. You know, I was still had a long way to go, but I got comfortable in the car, which I think is like the most you can ask for in year one, is just be comfortable behind the wheel. So I decided that, okay, let's go racing. And then this was this past year, so 2022. And of course, everyone's like, well, you really should look at doing like the local races, because Calabogie has their PT and GT series, which are like these local club races. But I was like, no, like I really want to kind of push this. And, you know, I think I'm okay. And I think I'm good. And just my head was so big. And I was like, I'm going to go racing in CASC. I wanted to do some regional stuff and do some real racing. And essentially that's kind of where that winter we put, you know, aero on the car. We got the car ready to be an actual race car. And I did my first full race season, my first race season period this past year. So I'm brand new. Like I'm learning as I go. Driver development is everything for me. And it's just been a very humbling experience, but also like super rewarding, as I'm sure any driver can say. Like this is not something that it's a slow burn, in the sense that every single time you do a race, I feel like the chunks that you're taking out from knowledge and experience and the time that you're cutting down on your laps is so big. So it's kind of rewarding in that way. So that's kind of how all this started. So
That's crazy. I mean, I love your energy and your passion already. You're 2 years in and you're just already like rearing to go. Talk to us a little bit about your sim experience and like what you used to train.
yeah, super limited. I have a sim at home, and I always feel like the worst person ever, because I know how much or how many people are really passionate about sim racing, and they're all really, you know, they know every single part and every single piece, and they know the different brands. I just knew that I needed a sim racer to practice. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go buy a sim racer. So, you know, Marc Andre and the guys at Apex V2R just pretty much set me up, and I have this like giant rig downstairs. I couldn't tell you what brand it is or what's going on. All I know is it's got the triple screens, it's got the steering wheel, and it does a pretty damn good job of simulating the track experience. And yeah, it's just spending time on there. I do coaching once a week, and then I just do my own like test sessions. I use iRacing. And obviously most of the sessions that I do are at Motorsport. But I'll do the weekly races. They have like the weekly series that cycle through. So I'll do those. And I think it's helped a lot. I think that in the off season, it's tough because I notice a big disconnect. I think a lot of people are mixed on the sim. I'm definitely in that boat. Coming from being in a car and going on the sim, I don't love it. I like to brake a lot. Like I really drive on my brakes. And I noticed that in the simulator, you don't get that G-force. So braking is very difficult for me in the simulator. So going from a real race car into the sim, I think there's a lot that's left to be desired. But when I look at it from the other side, where I'm like, if you haven't been in a race car and you are on the sim, it's as close as you're going to get. Like it's amazing. And on top of that too, in terms of learning new tracks, I think it's invaluable. Like being on the simulator to learn a new track, that is the difference between 3 test days to getting up to pace versus going on your first test day and being up to pace. So I really like the sim for that. And, you know, fortunately, I only started 2 years ago, but, you know, I've kind of dove in quite a bit. You know, I did the Skip Barber programs. I've been in the F4 car. This year I'm getting into the GT4 cars, which I'm really excited about. And I've done once again, I'm probably gonna have the least track experience on track, but I've been fortunate. I've been to a few different tracks here and there, and I've done all the CASC tracks, which is so Shannonville, Calabogie, Motorsport. I was at Coda. That was like epic. So I highly recommend going to Coda if you have the opportunity. So the sim is great. And it's just the thing that keeps you disciplined, right? I know that we're blessed. I think in 2023, what did you do back in the day when you couldn't get to the track? You're pretty screwed. Because racing is not like every other sport. Like, it's not something you can just will into existence. You can't just go out to the gym and work out harder or spend an extra hour, working on your free throw, because to get to the track, you're probably spending $1,000 minimum just to get your car out there. And then you got to wait for the days to be open. Then you got to hope, if you're trying to practice in rain weather versus dry weather, you got to hope you get that. So you don't have like your desire to want to become better doesn't really matter compared to the access you have to become better. And I think this simulator is kind of the great equalizer on that, where it's like you can put a simulator at home. No, it's not the exact same thing, but now you can just will yourself into better driving. You can just hop on the simulator, put some laps down. But that was the biggest thing coming from, just traditional sports going into motorsport. It's like, wow, that practice time is very valuable. And just being able to get access to it is not something that you can do like another sport.
Yeah, you really have to make sure every time you get in the car, you take advantage of it and you make sure you're learning something.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot when you look at it like an investment. And I think that's one of the nice things about like kind of paying for this yourself is that, once again, like I came from nothing, right? And I choose to take my money and light it on fire so I can go racing. But when you do that, you treat it way different. Like, you can't race or be a driver if you don't love it, because it makes no sense. So when you go there and if you look at it as just like another track day, like if you've got someone paying for it, or, and that's different than sponsors. So if you are having sponsors and partners, you're still paying for it because you're making these commitments and these promises to these partners. But if you're just going on, your parents' dollar or whatever it is, you can get this like level of entitlement. And I found that actually at Skip Barber, because there's a lot of young kids that were in the Formula 4 program, and it blew my mind how they were just like so bratty and just so like, well, I wanted this lunch versus that lunch. I think there's a bit of a stereotype in that. And I couldn't imagine, because I'm like, if I spent $10,000 to be here, I am like laser focused. I'm taking in every single word. But once again, these kids kind of grow up with, oh, well, sure. Yeah, mommy and daddy are going to pay for it. And they go and they're just not as appreciative of the moment. Now, look, they've got the raw talent and the fearlessness. So we probably at like 32, I have to pay more attention to keep up with them. But that's just one thing I do appreciate about having to invest yourself into the sport, is that you take it very seriously. Because if it's, $12,000 for a test day, what else could you do with that $12,000? You could do a lot. So it forces you to really take it seriously and treat it like the business that it is.
You mentioned coaching. Did you say that you have someone that coaches you once a week?
Yeah. So my coaching career, honestly, it's really been the only thing that's carried me through. Like we did. So once again, like I was saying, I jumped into this, full speed with no knowledge or background on the space. And it's a difficult space to navigate. Like motorsport is not simple. It's not straightforward. And you can make a lot of mistakes that end up being very costly. So on the coaching side last year, I was really, really fortunate because I got linked up with Demi Chalkias and Bill Chalkias. And Bill and me, like Demi was my coach for the first race, but me and Bill kind of hit it off like right away. Just, I don't know, it was just a good vibe. And he ended up being my coach and crew chief and everything for all of last year. And we ended up winning the championship, right? And in GT3 as a rookie. So that was, really telling. And we had a lot to work to do with the car because the car wasn't really where it needed to be in GT3. So it was really exciting to come out with a success doing that. And it was 100% because of Bill. I did not know, I could not navigate myself around a race weekend. I don't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been before. And that coaching and that mentorship is what allowed me to focus more on becoming better as a driver and focusing more on what was going on the track rather than, holy shit, like, okay, well, how do the sessions work? And, okay, well, qualifying, how does that, it's just a lot to take in. So that was instrumental on the track. And then off the track, yeah, I've got, my boy, Alex Ellis, like he's unreal. I love that guy more than anything. He's the most technical driver that I've ever met. He's fast as hell. And on the simulator, like it's insane. The amount of, you're drinking from a fire hose when you're working with Alex. And it's just been like this really, really, really awesome experience. And I feel like I'm learning a lot because I'm taking the time to like, just work with some of these people. And that's made a really big difference, I think. And obviously this year I'm racing with VPX and Vince and those guys, and Alex is the engineer, which is, by the way, super random story. So, I always felt like I was meant to be in motorsport in some way, because one of my best friends, Kevin Stadelman, when I told him I wanted to go racing, he had said, oh, hey, like one of my buddies from university is a race car driver. And he had mentioned Alex Ellis. And I didn't know Alex at the time. Turns out whenever I started racing last year, someone had recommended that I link up with a sim coach, and they recommended Alex Ellis. So me and Alex linked up for the first time, and we're like, hey, we've got a mutual buddy. We kind of ended up hitting it off. And then after the CASC season, when I decided to do a couple of the races with the VPX guys, they let me know, they're like, oh, by the way, keep it low key, but we're going to announce that Alex is our actual engineer. I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is the craziest full circle thing. So coaching is everything. And it's funny because I like to think that, when it comes to motorsport, I like talking about my experience, because I think there are a lot of people out there who want to get into racing and they just don't know where to start, or they have the wrong mindset. So whenever I came in initially, I was like, all I want to do is get signed off at the track so I never have to work with a coach again. So I can just go out there and do my own thing. And that lasted maybe like 2 track days until you realize that you only get better with coaching. Like it's the sport where it's not like you can just figure it out, because you don't have enough time at the track to just figure it out. So when you're there, you have to maximize your track time. So coaching became everything for me. And it's only been a year and a half, 2 years, I guess, but each of the seasons and each of the things that I've done, the coach and the mentor and the team have been pretty much the main variable when it comes to how I've been able to perform. So it's been really, really valuable.
So I've got a follow-up question about that, and you can decide to kind of dive into it, or we can just kind of graze over it if you don't want to talk about it, because I know it's kind of keeping your cards close to your chest. But when it comes to your coaches, is there anything that really stands out that you'd be willing to share or talk about?
Yeah, like honestly, I don't really subscribe to the whole like keeping it close to your chest. Like I'm a 2-year driver. Like I'm not here to blow anybody's mind. I'm just trying to get better. I don't have any hardcore secrets that I'm like, okay, this is going to make the difference. Like when we did CASC last year, my goal was if we could get 1 podium and maybe finish 6th or 7th, then that to me is like that's a championship year, right? And we came out and did really well. I'm not going into FEL with any delusions of who I am. I'm going up against some of the best race car drivers in Canada, people that have tons of experience on these tracks. Like I want to go there and I want to learn and I want to get better. And I don't know if there's much they can learn from me, because I don't like, they're going to be better drivers than I am, but I would love to learn from them. So for us, things that have been working, number one is like, where do I even start? I guess it's more like last year. Like last year was a big thing, because I'll never forget that first CASC race, coming from only having done track days to then jumping immediately into your first race weekend at CASC. I'd only ever done point by passing, and that was like a track day. So when you're on the grid for a practice and you're with all the GT cars, like GT1 to GT5, I think it was, or maybe GT1 to GT3, and you've got these GT1 cars blowing by you in turn 2, like door to door, and you're just shitting bricks because you're like, I've never done this before. What am I doing? It's really humbling, and you realize how you cannot focus on the technique. You can't focus on the speed. You can't focus on the entry, the apex, the exit. You can't focus on anything other than just get comfortable in the car. And that took the whole race weekend. But after that race weekend, you survive it and you're like, whoa, I'm now comfortable in the car. And when you get comfortable in the car, then you start speaking a different language, because now you're noticing different things. You're not so overwhelmed with, okay, like don't look like an idiot, avoid cars, whatever. Now you're starting to be like, okay, like I know what a race start is like. Like I know what it's like to have a car blow by me, or have to blow by someone, or oh, that's how close you can get. I understand. Or you start noticing like, oh, maybe I do want to get a little bit faster. Why am I slow in this area? And then you start talking to your coach, and they can start laying out some of the theory behind it. So you start even realizing that there is theory, because like I said, like not having done this before, you don't know what the ins and outs and the science is behind racing. You just talk to anybody who doesn't race, right? Everyone will be like, oh yeah, you're a race car driver. Yeah, I've done 200 on the 401 before. And you're just like, oh my God, like you have no idea what you're talking about. So that's like just this progressive build comfort, and then you can start chipping away at other things. Like for me, and this is probably basic for anybody listening if they're race car drivers already, but like just for people that don't race, I didn't realize how, I always thought it was accelerating and braking. That's driving and turning. That was it. But you come to learn real soon that the only thing that matters is stability and the weight transfer of the car. Like that's all of it. Like you could break down racing, in my opinion, completely to where is the weight on the car? Is it on the nose? Is it on the rear? Is the car stable going into the turn? All of that matters so much more. And you can kind of express throttle and braking as weight on the nose or weight on the back, right? And that thought process of forget the speed, forget the inputs. The inputs just decide what kind of stability you have in the car. It opens up an entire new language for you to speak, and it opens up an entire different way to look at things. So for us this year, we're going to approach it the exact same way we did last year. Like we're out there, we're trying to get better. It's a development year for us. I'm really excited to be in the GT4 platform. So we're obviously racing the Mercedes GT4. I think that by the end of the year last year, I always say that the car is always going to be better than I am just because I'm still learning. But I think that by the end of it, we won the last 8 races of CASC, right? So that was the progress from 7th to 4th to 2nd. And then we finally won our first race at Calabogie. Once again, that all just gave the confidence to start focusing on more things. I think by the end, we were starting to milk a lot of what we could get out of that platform. I'm sure there's still a few tenths in there that I'm just not, I'm not there yet, but I'm excited to jump into an actual factory built race car and just kind of see, see what the differences are there. So yeah, I don't have anything to keep close to my chest. I feel really blessed that I had Demi and Bill to work with last year to guide me. I feel really blessed that this year I get to work with VPX and Vince and Alex and Ryan and, Ken and all those guys that are working their asses off to put a good team together. I'm happy to share anything if people think they can learn something from me. And I'm hoping that, as I go out there, over the course of the season, we just, develop like we did in this past year in CASC.
What are your thoughts heading into Honda Indy GP3R, having not done a street circuit yet?
I'm excited about it. I like that it's going to be this new challenge. I really like the spotlight. I do well under pressure. That's one thing that I think, and I think this came from video games when I was a kid, like really, really young. I used to be really good at Halo 2. And it's funny because I felt like I could beat most people, but ironically, some of my closest matches, like I'd beat the best guys out there, like nonstop. But then some of the times where I'd almost be slipping up is when I would play against people that really sucked. It's almost like the better the competition, it kind of forces me to become better. And I think that with something like the Indy, I'm excited to be under that spotlight and have that pressure because, of course, we've got sponsors, we've got people that that are looking for us to do well. And I think that once again, for us, just going out there and being able to perform and put a smile on people's faces is going to be priority number one. And from a performance standpoint, by the way, once again, to be clear, I think it's like just finishing the race, like having a good, clean race, being able to go and put on a good show for people, and that's kind of the priority number one. So I like that. There's a lot of people. It's not like it's a situation where you can get all of this test time at Indy and GP3R. Like everyone's going to have the same amount of track time. So I think everyone's going to be at a slight disadvantage compared to like if you had a bigger budget and you can just go and do every test day at Motorsport, and then you're obviously going to have an advantage. There is obviously a majority of the drivers that have raced at the Indy and GP3R before, but I think, and that puts me at a huge disadvantage. But once again, I'm just happy that at least on that weekend, we're all going to have the same amount of time to practice and the same amount of time to kind of get ready. And I really do trust Alex and I trust the team, and they always put together the things that they think I need to do to be ready. And, for me, that's really easy. Like prescribe me what I need to do and I'll just go ahead and do it. So I'm excited. I'm mostly excited for the fact that we have this amazing platform to showcase Canadian racing. I've been talking to so many people about how motorsport's one of the fastest growing sports, about how they have one of the most loyal fan bases, about how obviously everybody is benefiting from Drive to Survive, the Netflix effect. And the fact that now, I'm going to get to race at arguably one of the biggest races in Canada. I'm just really excited about it. I'm really pumped for it.
Do you have a favorite Motorsports era or series that if you could, you'd want to race in, maybe travel back in time or even something present?
Yeah, like, once again, I'm not a student of the sport yet, so I couldn't even tell you. Like I talked to some race car drivers because I've obviously made some friends now that are in the space, and these guys are out here naming like each driver from each track, each series, like each model of car from like the 70s. I'm like, damn, like that looks cool, but I don't even know about that yet. I think so many people have a love for cars and a love for driving. It's so hard to get into because most people don't have access to go do it. Like basketball is easy to get into. You pick up a ball, you go to the court and you start falling in love. You've got to have a deep passion to watch something knowing you might never do it. And I think that's a lot of fans, right? Like a lot of fans will watch and they have such a deep passion because they love it, even though they know they might never do it. For me, it's hard for me to love something that I know I might never do. So as a kid, I never thought I'd be driving race cars. Like that was never something that mattered to me. I love street cars. So I could tell you everything about all the street cars, but what ended up happening is like my love for street cars kind of graduated into a love of racing. And of course I'm jaded now, right? I used to be very much like, okay, I can't wait to get my, my dope supercar. I've been waiting my whole life. Like I can't wait to drive around my hometown with like the sickest car in town. I used to dream about those days. And now I'm so jaded because I'm like, I don't care about these supercars anymore. I just want to buy more race cars. So like I'm kind of screwed in that sense. But look, if I had a favorite, I did catch the bug. So my mom and my wife, and even me, I'm like, why can't I just pick up like knitting or something that was like a normal cost? But of course, you have to go with the like aside from like piloting planes and like racing yachts. I think this is probably the worst. But if I had to do anything, Formula One's what got me into it. I love the Formula cars. Obviously the V10 era, like that's just, I couldn't imagine the feeling, not only of being a driver, but being a fan. And then when I got into racing, I wanted to go into the open wheel ladder. So either do, the road to Indy, or do the Formula ladder, like the Formula 4 and then the, Formula regionals. And what ended up happening is that, and I feel more comfortable in those cars too. So I did the F4 thing, and loved it. Like I really like the high downforce cars. Like I like the aero cars, a lot. It's just in Canada, it doesn't really make sense. And as a career, it doesn't make sense either. I'm very, like I said, I'm not fooling anybody in the sense like race car driving is never going to be my number one priority. It's never going to happen. I'm a businessman first. And now I just feel really lucky that I can have this thing that I'm deeply passionate about and that I love that I do, to keep my mind off business. And it's the other thing in my life. Business has always been the only thing. Now I have business and this other thing that I get to kind of pour my passion and also get to express myself because I get to talk way different and just be way more comfortable when I'm doing these type of interviews versus when I'm trying to answer to analysts about how, a stock price is doing or what our next move is. Right. So it's been a really great way to express myself. So when I think about how can I spend as much time as possible racing in sports cars, it's a very clear progression. Like you can do this. There's SRO, there's IMSA, and there's a really deep business culture in there when it comes to partnerships and driving value that I know really well. I come from that world. So me being a race car driver is an amazing platform, not only to bring a bunch of partners together and hopefully drive value, but it's awesome for my team too. Like, I've obviously starting new businesses. It's great to be like, hey guys, come on out. We'll go chill at the race and driving, all this type of stuff. It's just a beautiful thing. And, that didn't make as much sense in open wheel because we don't have an intense, very structured open wheel series here in Canada. I know we have Formula 1600 and not taking away from that at all, but it's different taking sponsors out to, an IMSA event or an FEL sports car race versus to a F1600 race, right? And if I wanted to do anything open wheel in terms of a Formula car, or that type of car, it would have been F4 in the US, which is the same price arguably as doing a full FEL GT4 series, except for it's not as exciting. And vice versa, I would have had to do USF 2000 in the US, where I'm racing against a bunch of, 14 to 16-year-olds that are going to absolutely spank me because they have zero fear and they've been living their entire life doing this. Like it just didn't make sense. So for me, sports car racing and that GT4 level seemed where I could get the most driver development, but also build out the best possible program to do this long term. So that's kind of how I ended up here and where it's at in terms of where I'd want to be racing. That's what inspired me.
Do you have any sponsors, or can you talk a little bit about that networking and relationship building?
Yeah, look, we have some amazing sponsors, and you know what? I have a whole lot of love and respect outside of them just supporting us, but all of them have come on board because they support the story. Like my whole story is that I wasn't supposed to graduate high school, and every single time I've been counted out, I somehow, bounce back and just deliver. And for me, it's always been this thing where I always believe I can do it. And I think for most of my life, people didn't believe I could do it. And I've been counted out. And now I have a bit of a track record for being the underdog. Even when I came into racing last year, you know, it was definitely like we were laughed at quite a bit, just because like I had no idea what the hell we were doing. And then we came and won the championship, right? So for me, I think a lot of sponsors just believe in what we're looking to do, and we're looking to do this long term. You know, we would love to continue racing as long as we feel good and we feel like this is what makes sense. So, you know, yeah, we've got sponsors. We have ACS, Air Charter Services. You know, it's we deal with private jets. We have a Celebrity Limousine. We've got Detonate Group. You know, huge shout out to them. We've got FlexPay, which is awesome fintech company, and what they do is if you have failed payments, let's say you're e-commerce and you have failed payments, these guys will go ahead and they have a bunch of algorithms that will pretty much help you reduce your failed payments. Like who else can I even think of? I'm probably missing some people here, but I'll make sure to give them some respect. But the whole thing is that I'm not the best driver out there. So any of these teams or any of these companies that decide to put backing behind us, they do it because they believe in us. And my hope, and you know, we've always been loyal. Like if you know, you look at anything in business and anything even on the track, I'd much rather work with the same people I started with in day one at day 10 or like year 5 or whatever, let's say, than try to recycle through all this stuff. So it's very important for us to drive value. And that kind of gets into the next point. I've seen a lot of drivers, and I know this because when I was at True Local, we used to get sponsorship offers all the time from drivers, and they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Like they do not approach it from the perspective of driving value. Most of them are just like, hey, we'll put your logo on the car. And it's like, great. You can't even tell me how many people are going to see it. I could take that same money, plow it into Facebook and Google. And even if it works or not, I can at least see how many people saw this, like, let alone people seeing it. Are they going to convert? Are they going to get leads? All this type of stuff. So we've always approached it from drive value first. So listen, you know, I only reach out to brands that I align with personally because I'm fortunate. You know, my network outside of racing, I do tons of keynote talks. You know, I've got my book, I run business. You know, FlexPay as an example, the CEO, Daryl, you know, is a good friend through business, you know, and fortunately, you know, they've been supportive of us, you know, for a while now. And it was just this past year that we actually did something formal with them. So I think it's just really important to understand that if you can't dead ass look at a sponsor in the eyes and say, listen, if you're going to give me $50,000, $30,000, I am going to return that money to you in the form of sales, and here's how I'm going to do it, then you don't really have any business asking people for money. And I think that's hard because it takes business knowledge. You've got to understand, okay, first of all, what are the needs of these sponsors? Like, what are they trying to look for? What is going to drive the needle for them? Because it's different across the board. If you're dealing with tech or SaaS or, you know, fintech companies, their metrics are going to be very different than if you're dealing with retailers. And then those are going to be very different than if you're dealing with franchise brands. And understanding what they need to get out of a relationship is step number one. And what most people don't even start with that. They just send over a deck that's generic and they haven't even asked the question of what do you care about? And then from there, it becomes, okay, you've done the proper due diligence in understanding the brand that you're reaching out to. They have now told you, you know what we care most about? We don't care about user signups. We care about user retention. Let's just use an example. Then the question becomes, can you drive user retention? How can you help them make sure that their users are sticking around more? And it takes a lot of business planning. And I think that that's where we have an advantage. I don't have any, we don't have like friends and family that sponsor me for racing. And I always said that I was down to invest a certain amount of money. But even though, despite how much we made from True Local, I think anybody can attest to this. Doesn't matter how much money you have, you go broke racing. So for me, the lucky thing is that I was able to fund my first year in racing because that was all experimental. And because we weren't in a pro series, we didn't have much to offer. But this year, I've already put money in just to show my sponsors and my partners that I'm serious, and I'll meet them in there. But if we can't raise money through sponsors, we ain't racing. Like we're treating it like a business, and that's how we want to approach it. So I obviously started, but I started a company called Riding Strikers. And essentially, it's a business. And the idea is that this business is going to hopefully generate revenue in the motorsport space, as well as provide value to our sponsors. So it's kind of like a marketing agency. So we do website design for drivers. We do content for drivers. So I partnered with a couple of buddies on it. And I'm, you know, the first, let's say, athlete driver that's in there. And it's been awesome. And we've got a couple more in the US that are coming on board. So that helps to offset some of the cost. but it also allows us to add more value to potential partners and sponsors. So we're still locking in sponsors for this year right now. And, once we're done, we're doing like a full announcement, full everything, just to show them. And we want to bring a lot of them to the race too, because if we can, and I would, any other drivers out there that are doing stuff with sponsors, like I would love to work with you guys, because I think that it's worth all of us getting our sponsors together to talk and have conversations. Because think about it, like if we can say that, hey, these two sponsors that I have, they want to do business with two of your sponsors. You bring that together, that's a lot of value that gets added. The beautiful thing about racing in the sponsorship area is I don't think it has to be competitive. I think it could be collaborative, because the more sponsors that we bring in, the more they're going to see there's value in it, the more they're going to want to work with one another. And then at the end of the day, that just benefits all the drivers. So it's tough. Like, it's not easy. But because I had to raise money for a true local, and I've been used to being told no like 10,000 times when you're raising money for a business, finding the right partners and being able to convince them of the value you bring to the table isn't foreign to me. I'm used to it. So I just have a huge shout out and major love for all the ones that have decided to support us so far, because we have value to bring, but I think that they just believed in our story and what we could deliver more than anything else. So that's what we're excited about.
So from what you just said, I gathered three kind of major points. One is relationship building. The other one is networking. And then the third is storytelling.
Yeah, like I would say, to be honest, it's isolate businesses that are going to value from motorsport. So start there. Like, don't spray and pray. Isolate businesses, and then before you reach out, learn about them. Like, don't send a cold email being like, "Hey, I love your brand." Like, know them. And then number two is just take the time to learn what they need. It's like, don't pitch them cold. You need to understand what they need, and I used to sit on the other side all the time listening to influencer pitches or ambassador pitches, and you can tell that they just did 8 of these meetings in a day, and they're just generically pitching shit that I've never even told them matters to us. So immediately I'm turned off. I'm like, you don't know what we are. You just want our money. So I think, once again, isolate brands that you think you can relate to. And then number two is ask them what they actually need, and then take it away and see if you can actually deliver that. That's kind of like the importance of it. It's not hard to find businesses. It's not hard to reach out to businesses. There's a million out there. You could just go on the TSX or the TSXV, like the stock exchange, and print off every single company and just hammer them with a message and be like, hey, listen, this is what we do. But finding the ones that actually are going to benefit from being involved in either motorsport, in your personal brand, in FEL, in like whatever brand of car manufacturer you're racing, that's where the magic happens.
I like the idea of like being collaborative too, because I think especially in Canada, with everything being such a small scale, the sport can achieve so much more if people were more collaborative and work together than competitors. But that's tough sometimes, especially with the race car drivers.
Yeah. And I mean, FEL is also really trying to work on getting that, like conveying that message as well. I mean, with the Honda Indy VIP tickets, like that suite is intended to be a networking space for, sponsors of all of the teams, sponsors of FEL Motorsports. Just based off of what Mark is just saying, if we're all vetting the companies that are interested in motorsport and believe that they can benefit from investing in motorsport, then there's probably common ground where they can all work together as well.
I think so. I think once again, if there's like a network of drivers that are collaborating with their sponsors, and I get it, like, look, people get greedy when it comes to cash. I'm no way, shape, or form suggesting sharing sponsorship dollars. But I am saying, let's say there's 3 or 4 drivers that get together. Let's say I'm working with, private jets, limousines, luxury hotels, luxury men's clothing. And over here, they're working with, women's luxury clothing, high-end restaurants and whatever. And those are some of their sponsors. There's obviously clear overlap. And at the end of the day, when you can go, like if I can go to my sponsor, my partner, and say, hey, listen, what if I can get you a meeting with the executive at so-and-so? No guarantees, no nothing, but like we can make the intro, make the meeting. That's me providing value as a partner, right? And when you start talking, especially like in the finance space, like meetings are everything, hot leads are everything, introductions are everything. And when you look at IMSA, that's what a lot of the sponsors are paying for. A lot of the sponsors are paying to be able to rub elbows with executives they want to do business with. So once again, huge shout out if there's any drivers in FEL that are listening to this that want to talk about this. Like, I'm more than happy to have this conversation, because I think that, once again, on the track is one thing, but off the track, like, we can all win together for sure.
This is the hot lap section. Rapid fire Q&A. You want to dive into some? feel free. But first question here is wet or dry races? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, loaded question, right? I prefer dry races, but I've historically, in my long tenure of racing of 1 year, done well in the wet because I think it equalizes it for me. So dry for sure, but I actually don't mind wet. I just hate it in the middle. It's got to rain. If you're going to rain, rain.
Which is most important to you, corner entry, apex, or exit?
Exit.
Bucket list track to drive.
Honestly, I really want to go to Sebring. I want to check out those bumps.
Bucket list event to attend as a fan.
Oh, Las Vegas Grand Prix. Like, no offense or buts. I'm convinced that's going to be the biggest event in North America, period. Formula One, you get those cars down the strip. Definitely right now, Las Vegas Grand Prix.
Favorite Mario Kart character?
Yoshi.
And if you could use a Mario Kart power up on track, what would it be?
Oh, definitely the star. I can start bumping into people and crashing into walls and stuff and get 0 damage. Plus, I get a speed boost. Yeah, I'm taking that.
Okay, so we'll go into some more personal stuff now. Mark, who would you say has been the most influential person in your life? Maybe if you want to answer this in business and then also in racing.
I honestly, there's so many people. I think that I can just name a few people off the top of my head right now. This might not be the most influential, but just people that have mattered a lot. There's David Osborne. I don't think he even knows this because I don't know if we've talked in a long time, but he influenced me to quit my job and get into business, which obviously ended up being great for me. I have a really good friend right now, Jason Brown. We are complete polar opposites in a lot of the things that we think about, but the through lines of what matter most to us are completely aligned. So he has opened my eyes so much, and he's doing it a lot for other founders and stuff out there. I think just off the top, like those are just two people that just kind of come to mind right now. There's been so many more. Once again, I'm a kid who came from nothing. So to have been able to have the opportunities that I have, a lot of people have extended out and reached out and helped me. So those are the two that just come to my mind right now.
And then what about in racing?
In driving, like just my friends that I've met. So like Demi, Bill, Alex Ellis, right? Kyle Raineri, who's an IMSA driver out of the US. Just anybody that showed me any sort of respect or just, gave me a shot in racing. Chantal, from CASC, she's this rock star, awesome racer. And it was great racing against her. And that was awesome. There's just, those are the people that have inspired me. I'm more inspired by the people that I actually know than kind of like figures that I aspire to be. So those are the people that made a big difference for sure.
This year with you and Demi both racing GT4, how much help do you think you'll be getting from her?
I suspect I won't get any help from them, which is totally okay and totally accepted. And I actually really want to see her do super well. Like I said, I'm just excited to be on the same track as her. Like she inspired me to pursue racing. So I'm just excited to be out there with them. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes. If there was someone that I'm rooting for outside of myself, it's going to be Demi. So I'm excited to see her out there.
So what are you looking forward to the most in 2023 for the season?
More driver development, more seat time. That's really what it is. For me, I'm not trying to go out there and be stupid and hot-headed. I have nothing to prove. I started driving 2 years ago. We won a championship last year, and we did that because we went in with the mentality that we were starting from scratch and we needed to take it slow. This year, the stakes are way higher. Just the cost of the car, the level of the competition. So I'm just going to approach it the exact same way where it's like, listen, I want to go out there and it's not about winning races in race one or year one. It's about racing against better drivers, working on my racecraft, getting used to the GT4 platform, because I think if I can have a solid, safe season, and that opens up way more doors to potentially do some driving in the US. When a team needs a bronze driver that has experience and can just hop in the car and be ready to go, that's what I'm excited about. So for me, I'm just excited for that next level of competition. I'm excited to see what it's like to be part of a professional race weekend. I'm excited for the new level of pressure. Obviously it's always nerve wracking, but I am excited to see how I deal with it and see what it takes to race at that level. So it's probably not as exciting as people being like, I can't wait to take all the podiums and this, that. But for me, I'm happy to be in a new platform, racing against some of the best drivers in Canada. And I'm excited to see where I'm at once I'm done this year compared to where I started.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge for you in your racing career thus far?
Well, it would have definitely been just maneuvering around a race weekend and dealing with the car if I didn't have the people that I had. Luckily, the people that I have worked with have taken that responsibility completely, so it allows me to focus on driving. So that would have been a huge challenge. If I didn't have someone to help kind of mentor me through that, that would have been a challenge, but luckily it was okay. When I think back on the things that were the most stressful in my racing career so far, it was the first time we didn't know whether to go on slicks or rains. And then once again, I'm sure most drivers experienced this for the first time in karting when they were like 14. But for me, it was in my second race weekend. And it was like, I didn't understand that level of tension. I didn't understand like the whole paddock, right? Everyone in the paddock is just like looking up at the sky. You're looking at each other. What is someone doing? What are we doing? You got tires ready to go to switch. Like, and of course, for me, I hate the idea of, okay, it's a little bit wet, but we're going out on slicks. Cause I'm like, yo, like that. I'm like, that's the last thing I want to be doing. But of course, you look out and you're like, well, they're all going on slicks. We don't have a chance to do anything if we don't go on slicks. So we're going to do that. So that sort of like flux of not knowing what's up. I'm cool if I'm out on the track and it starts raining because I know everyone's on the same tires. And I'm also cool if we all go on rains and it dries up because then everyone's on the same tires. But to have that pressure of making the call right before you have to go to the grid, that was just a whole new level. Now, with that being said, like most things I found in racing, once you do it once, you now have a framework for how to deal with it. So it happened once. And then after that, of course, you know how it is, right? Like racing, the weather says one thing, it does something completely different. And I got way more comfortable with it. And it got to the point where I actually found that I enjoyed racing in the rain. As long as I was on rain tires and everyone else is on rain tires, I actually like it. So if it's raining, cool, put me out there. But just that, like, the biggest challenge was honestly just, all right, we don't know what to go out on. We'll figure it out like a second before. But ironically, your biggest challenge, you know, typically is right before your biggest accomplishment. So at Calabogie, that was my first place win, or first place finish was midway through the race. It started raining and everyone was on slicks. And I went from third to first in the last lap. And that was like the best battle I've had. And I love that video and that footage. And once again, haven't had a shit ton of battles, but that was one where I felt like what I had learned prior to the season and all the challenges we went through really showed in that last lap, just kind of how we managed it. So yeah, I would say that one moment of the one time where it's like we hadn't experienced this last minute change in weather, and you know, overcoming that was probably the biggest challenge. I'm sure this year the challenge is going to be, like you said, Indy and GP3R. How fast can we adapt to a track? How fast can we get comfortable? And then of course, how fast can we get up to speed? How fast can we get to the pace? And then once you work through all of those milestones, if you can, in like a 30-minute practice, then you're like, okay, how do I race on this track? So I'm sure that those are going to be big challenges this year.
Proudest moment in your racing career, the Calabogie win?
That was definitely my proudest moment for sure, because I think a lot of people were kind of, you know, raising their eyebrows when I said I was going to just jump into CASC after only having done maybe like 8 track days. The fact that I went to CASC and most of the races were at Motorsport, the track I'd never done before, but Calabogie is the one I practiced on all the year before. Now, the thing about Calabogie is that when CASC went to Calabogie, the guys that I started driving with in that first year, they had stuck around Calabogie to do the GT and PT races. So they were racing that course like 6 times or maybe like 4 or 5 times before we had even got there. So I was like, oh shit, like I gotta go there. And of course I'm going to have I felt like I would have had an advantage against the rest of the CASC people because most of them spend their time at Motorsport. So I'm like, okay, I actually know Calabogie quite well, but it's been a year since I've driven it. So for me to go there, I wanted to make sure to beat the rest of the people that were in CASC at that specific race, just because that was the one where I had the best chance. But also the guys that I started with, they had already been racing there. And I was the one who jumped up to CASC. So I wanted to just do well. I wanted to, you know, go there and prove to them that, hey, listen, I didn't make a mistake by going to CASC. So coming in first in those races, that was a really, really proud moment. And yeah, just I've always considered Calabogie my home track. So I just wanted to do well there. And it was funny because some of the coaches and, you know, like I said, like Jay from Power Sport and all those guys, they were there. So it was just kind of nice to go back and make them proud, just in the sense of, you know, I was this driver who learned at Calabogie. And I think that helped me a lot at Motorsport, to be honest. I would much rather learn to drive at Calabogie than learn to drive at Motorsport. I love Motorsport, unbelievable track, very different than Calabogie. And I think that Calabogie will kind of teach you the turns and the fundamentals and the technique. And then Motorsport just requires you to have the balls to attack those turns in a way that is going to allow you to carry your speed and keep going. But to take that mentality to learn to drive at Motorsport, you're probably going to think speed is everything. And you're going to sacrifice corners because of it. Going to Calabogie, where you've got 20 turns, it's tough. So I liked that. So that was my proudest moment, I think, was winning at Calabogie.
Any advice that you can give to anyone in your position who might be looking to get into racing, how to start or how to go?
Yeah, I think the thing, and I love talking about this, we're actually filming, well, through Riding Strikers, we're actually filming like 2 documentaries over 5 years, just kind of, and I know a lot of people are getting into this with motorsport. Our angle is starting from scratch up to however far we go. And the idea is to show, okay, you're 30 years old, you've never done any racing, but you love cars. How do you get started? So the advice I would just say is like, first of all, swallow the fact that it's confusing as hell. Where do you, if you don't know, where do you start? Do you buy a car? Do you call the tracks? Is it track days, clubs, all this? Then maybe you want to race based on what type of car you're driving, and that changes everything, right? And then you start looking at the US and there's all these different clubs in the series. So just understand it's confusing and understand there's a lot to understand. There's a lot to wrap your head around. But I would just say that it's the easiest way to get started is choose a car that you can afford, something that you're okay with beating the shit out of, and then just start doing track days. Because what's going to happen is by you doing track days, you're going to get involved in the community, you're going to get involved in the culture, and you're going to see what the next logical step is for you. And that's kind of what happened to me. You know, I didn't know anything about, people would be like, well, you know, there's CASC and there's SPC and there's FEL and there's Formula 6. I would just like nod and agree. I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like those all sound great. I had no idea what any of them meant. So yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay. And I feel like they knew I didn't know, but they would still keep using them. And I'm like, guys, I'm not picking up anything you're putting down. But essentially, I would say that go to the track. That's the best place to start. If you're old, all right. So listen, if you're a kid, get into karting, right? Like that's that. But I got into it at 30, which is old for a driver. So if you want to get into a car, you don't want to start in karting. I would say, look, you want to get a Miata through to an E46. Like these are car, like, and then everything in between that realm is a good place to start. And then another good place to start is just to decide what type of cars you want to drive. Do you want to drive sports cars or open wheel? I'm not a huge Radical fan. I've driven them and it's nothing against the way they drive. I get off on loving the car that I'm driving. Like that's a big part of it for me. Like I have to think the car is cool. And I just don't have the same love for radicals as I do for like F4 or the Indy cars or the sports cars. So I never got big into that. But yeah, I would say figure out what type of car you want to drive. Is it an open wheel? Is it a radical, like an open wheel formula type thing, or an open wheel radical, or is it a sports car? And then from there, you can just pick something in your budget to go to track days. And that's what I would say, because anything past that is just, there's so many if-then statements. Well, do you want to race in Canada? Do you have a budget? Do you want to take this seriously? Do you want to do a full season? Do you want to do just one race? Do you want to do a specific type of car? It all becomes this, these massive decision trees, and you probably are just better off getting to the track and starting there.
Is there anything that you would kind of like to shout out or promote, anybody or any companies, or, mention the book again?
Yeah, absolutely. My book. Like, look, I feel very blessed, and it was a hard journey to kind of get to this point where now I get to drive race cars and invest in it. So the book, True Founder, What No One Else Has the Guts to Teach You About Starting Your First Business. It's published by Forbes. It's like I said, just no bullshit about starting business. And it's the book that I wish that I had when I was starting True Local. And if anybody out here or that is listening that has an entrepreneurial knack, like this book is for you, because it's not about this LinkedIn bullshit of like, you need to be comfortable and you need to be fine. Like, no, if you're starting your first business, it's a grind and you need to understand that. So I think that there'll be a lot of benefit for people in the racing space that want to understand that. Of course, huge shout out to the people that believed in us, because right now, all the sponsors we currently have, we're currently working with more, but like ACS, Detonate, FlexPay, Driven Auto Works, A Celebrity Limousine, True Local, all of these businesses are the ones that supported me when I had nothing to offer. And my goal is to make sure that in 5 years, you're getting a badass return on what you did by believing in me. So huge shout out there. And then shout out to VPX. I'm super excited to be driving with Vince and his team. They've been absolutely amazing so far. They're rocking 2 gorgeous Mercedes. They let me wrap it in my livery, which I'm really excited to showcase the track. The team has been amazing. Alex has been amazing. Ryan's been amazing. And Ken's been amazing. So I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to shout these people out, because without any of them, I wouldn't be here talking to you and I wouldn't be racing this year. So thank you for that.
All right. Awesome, Mark. Thank you so much. That was an awesome interview and super insightful. I think the viewers are going to get a lot out of that.
Cool.
See you, Mark.
Take care, guys.
Still going bad on you anyway. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. I can feel like 80 rats in my Marys. Me and Drizzy back to back is getting